Likkutei Torah, Shlach Page 72, second column. Okay, the Alter Rebbe asked the question at the beginning, why didn't the Meraglim want to go into Eretz Yisrael? And he said we need to understand B'chlal, the concept of Eretz Yisrael. And then he starts saying all the mitzvahs, most of the mitzvahs, physical mitzvahs, were depending on the land of Eretz Yisrael. Besides the Beis Hamikdash, you have Trumas, Maises, Kodshim, all those things. See, the Alter Rebbe started explaining that Eliyahu says, "Ad tapikas atzah tikunim." You bring out the 10 tikunim, which are 10 spheres, and each one of them is called Olam. It's a concealment of Elokus, and then to such an extent, the godliness comes down into the world in a concealed way. Okay, so we're going to start on the second column, 7 lines into the Maimer of Shlach, second column on 72. So he said, that's the purpose of the neshama coming into the world. To elevate, to break evil through a surmeira. By through this, we revealed the level of godliness in all worlds. That the world should not conceal godliness. They should, on the contrary, they should be vessels to the revelations of Elokus through Asay Tev mitzvahs Maisius, through the action mitzvahs of 248 mitzvahs, which are 248 limbs of Hashem. So he says, what's the purpose? So the Alter Rebbe explains like this. There's a concept of Elam concealing Elokus. What's the purpose of the neshama coming into the world? The purpose of the neshama coming into the world is to refine the world, that the world, instead of concealing godliness, should actually be vessels for godliness, reveal godliness. But so therefore he says, ultimately it's Asay Tev. But first has to be the level of turning away from evil, in a level of in other words, in order to make world the vessel for Elokus, first you have to get rid of evil. Because as long as, like we said, you want to get dressed up for a banquet, you have to first take a shower. You can't be full of mud and put on clean clothing. A person is going to be full of evil and then they're going to do mitzvahs, it's not going to work. So in order to become the vessel, to put on the garments as vessels for godliness in the world, you need first to clean off the evil. Like it said, and then then it becomes revealed, this level of godliness, then you're able to receive. And then the level of Asay Tev, this revelation of Elokus down here, through the 248 biblical mitzvahs, which is Chachma Nafkes, which comes from the level of Chachma. So the Alter Rebbe here is saying as follows. Torah comes to the level of Chachma, and now the mitzvahs and mitzvahs HaTorah. What do mitzvahs do? They bring down the level of Chachma into the 248 different channels that Elokus could be revealed in the world. And therefore they're called Eivarim de Malka. Therefore in Zayar, the mitzvahs are called the limbs and the organs of Hashem. What do you mean the limbs of Hashem? Just like limbs of a person. That into them is drawn the life from the mind, meaning the neshama comes into the head, and then from the head it spreads itself out to the rest of the body. So what is a hand, a limb called a hand? It's the vessel for the life of the neshama to come into the functioning of the hand. Right, that's the purpose of a limb. A limb is basically a vessel for the revelation of the neshama. Just like the brain feels the pain of all the limbs, through the level of mitzvahs, from the level of Chachma Stima, the hidden Chachma, la'alman Stiman, la'alman is Galyan, from the land, from the concealed world into the revealed world. So bottom line is, what is the purpose of a mitzvah? You do a mitzvah, you bring down a level of godliness into the world that reveals itself through this mitzvah. That's why, like we learn, why did Hashem give us 248 positive mitzvahs, not 10, 15, 20? Because there's 248 ways of godliness being revealed in the world, and therefore you need 248 different vessels for that level of godliness to be handled in the world. And then it says, Cholav v'dvash, that the land of Eretz Yisrael is full of milk and honey, and chesed gevura. That's the level of chesed and gevura. Yeminu smaller, beinayu chalab. Whatever, without getting into it now. Cholav is chesed and dvash is gevura. Therefore, honey has a reddish tint to it. Honey is sweet. Okay, but that's a different story. Kamesha calls mitachas reisem shu amshach bechinis amshachas alukus. It's a revealing of alukus. Aidei mitzvahs ma'asis ramachim v'amid malka. And of the 248 limbs, so he says like this: most of the mitzvahs are in Eretz Yisrael. Okay, and what is that? The concept of a mitzvah, bringing down levels of alukus from chokhmah, from Torah, into chesed and gevura, meaning down into all the spheres. Yeah, and then into the world. Eretz Yisrael mechuvenes k'neged Eretz Yisrael mel shelamayla. Okay, so it says, it quotes the Medrash that says that the Beis Hamikdash above is connected to, is correspond mechuven k'neged Beis Hamikdash shelamata. Therefore, the primary level of mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael. Bottom line, because the concept of mitzvahs is to reveal elokus in the world, Eretz Yisrael is the level of cholav, dvash, milk and honey, which is chesed and gevura, which is the concept of bringing mitzvahs down into the world. Which part of the world is the ultimate keli and vessel for mitzvahs is Eretz Yisrael. Now he explains what the Meraglim wanted. Why didn't they want to go into Eretz Yisrael? The Meraglim were very, very lofty. The Malachim, I mean the Meraglim, with such a high level, they said, we don't want to bring godliness into the physical world. In other words, they said world and godliness have nothing to do with each other. So why in the world should we want to go into Eretz Yisrael? In the Midbar, everything was spiritual, right? So godliness was revealed in the spiritual world. Now you want to bring godliness into the physical world. The Meraglim said no, it's below it, like similar to the concept Moshe Rabbeinu says in last week's parsha. Miyayin li basar. Moshe Rabbeinu did not that he doubted Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu said, my level can't give meat. What do you want from me? I'm at Silas. The Meraglim said we can't lower ourselves to come into action mitzvahs. Then that's what they said. It's Eretz Eicheles Yishvahihi. They said Eretz Yisrael is a land that consumes its inhabitants. So the Meraglim, simply it means they were going to kill us. Here he says, no, what does it mean? Shaya B'daitim, they understood. Shem Yiyah Gili earns a Baruch Lamata K'mei Lamaila Yizbatel Mitzayusim Lagamri. The Meraglim said 1 minute. If Elokus, what's the ultimate goal of mitzvahs? We just learned, Alter Rebbe explained, that it's bringing the higher levels of Elokus into the physical world. That down here we should think like they do up there. That only Elokus exists. He says, if that's the case, then Gashmis won't exist anymore. So what are you gaining by bringing this into Gashmis? That's what they wanted, Dafka, to stay in the Midbar, meaning removed from Gashmis, the Midvar, Chanova, Shamshachas, Ein Tzabarchu, the Bechinas Dibur, Bechinas Malchus, Bechinas Eretz Yisrael, Shalamayla. They wanted, they wanted to stay in the Midbar. Midbar is Medaber, speech. They wanted to bring Elokus into the level of speech, like they did in the Midbar, rather than bring into action of coming into Eretz Yisrael. What?
Why do you say they say action? They cannot lower themselves to action. Action is not lowering themselves. It's one part of...
Action is lower than speech and thought. I'll give you an example. Don't ask me what it means. Everything we have from the Arizal never wrote anything. It was all from Reb Chaim Vital and his other students. And it says in Chassidus, the expression that Arizal had no connection to the concept of writing. Because writing is already bringing it tangible into a physical object. That Arizal was above that. So that Arizal did, what?
What the Meraglim want is not really that bad.
No, they didn't. That's the only way the Meraglim makes sense. Because 1 second, they're a tzaddikim, Rosh B'nai Yisrael Heima. Rashi said, Beis Shok Shedem, are you from the Gemara, right? They're a tzaddikim. And all of a sudden, 40 days later, they came back with such negativity. The answer is, what the way Chassidus explained it, the Meraglim weren't so bad.
So why is such a big punishment?
Why do we stay up Shavuos night every single year since Matan Torah? Because they went to sleep. And the Rebbe explained, they went to sleep because they thought, which was wrong, but they thought the neshama got to leave the body, just like the Meraglim. The neshama has to be out of Gashmias to get the Torah. The mistake is that's dafka what Hashem doesn't want. Hashem wants that the Torah should come into Dira B'Tachtenim. So there is a concept of action is much slower than thought or speech.
But that's a fine thing.
Yeah.
As a soldier,
But as they, correct.
As a soldier, you're supposed to do what you're told.
That's right. That's what their Aveda was. But it's not that they're a bunch of corrupt human beings, that they're low lives, that think Hashem can't conquer Eretz Yisrael.
It doesn't matter. They fell. So whatever.
100%. But that's what they're down for. But it wasn't so bad. They just said, oh, God can't do it. They saw all these miracles. They saw God could do it. What they meant is, you can't have Gashmias in the same level as Ruchnias.
The punishment was they got what they wanted.
Well, that's the question. It wasn't that, though. But what they wanted was that as the Midbar prepared themselves, 40 years of the Midbar allowed them that when eventually they went into Gashmias, they were able to influence the Gashmias rather than the Gashmias influencing themselves. Like we know, in order to be able to go out into the world and not become affected, you need to learn in yeshiva, so to speak. You need to have a Torah education. And then when you go out into the world, you shouldn't become affected by it. I said, we learned many times the story with the Rebbe Rashab. A guy asked him once, the Bachman in the city of Lubavitch were like, they turned the world back 50 years. That's the expression used. They turned back they were such out of Gashmias, it didn't exist. God. And somebody asked the Rebbe Rashab, why do you have to make the Bachman so fanatic? Why do you need to make the Bachman so crazy? That when they get married, why do you need to be so crazy when they're as Bachman? So the Rebbe Rashab gave him a mashal. The matzah bakery oven, that's what you can understand it from. Yeah? If you need the oven to bake at 300, you can't heat up the oven at 300 and push away the coals and bake at 300. Because when you push away the coals, it goes down to 200. So what do you need to do? When you want to bake a 300-degree oven, you have to heat up the oven to 500 degrees. Then when you push away the coals, the oven stays at 300. But if you're going to make the oven at 300, it's going to go down to 200. He said, Bachrim, people in the world, in order to keep frumkeit, you need to be 300 degrees. But everybody knows when you leave yeshiva, it's not the same anymore. So therefore, in yeshiva, we need to heat them up to 500 degrees. You don't need 500 degrees, you need 300. But in order to bake at 300, you need to be able to heat up to 500 degrees. That's what you need to do. And he says, the Zelach has, is the level of Dibur. Eretz Shalba Nikrab Shem Bechinas Eretz. Fisher Tachtein, Shebalukus. Like it says, Ha'aretz Adem Ragloi, Ksiv Havai B'chochma Yosed Eretz. Abba Yosed Brat, meaning the level of Dibur. Dvar Hashem, Sheshor Shemi Chochma, that comes from Chochma. Bottom line is, the Meraglim sinned, Alter Rebbe explains. That's why they didn't want to go into Eretz Yisrael. They felt you can't bring Kedusha into Gashmias that it should feel like Ruchnias does. You can't. Uknira b'mashal mitinuk. Shekol's man she'en le'meichen the yanika b'shleimus. As long as a baby, the Gemara says, "Ein atinik yedei likris abba yitem tam dogon." The Gemara says a baby doesn't know how to even say the word Abba, father, until he eats grain. In other words, babies have a sound, like he says, "Afal pi sheyesh lo kol, eisis pshutim." Even though a baby could, a mamish, a newborn, could scream and cry and hear sounds, but and but he can't combine letters together. He can cry or yell, but he doesn't know how to have the formation of the letters. Why? The chochma is not complete. Okay? So therefore, what did the Meraglim want? They wanted to into the level of Dibur Eretz Yisrael Shalamayla. They said, now the Rebbe just explained, there's a Gashmistic Beis HaMikdash, there's a spiritual Beis HaMikdash, Malchus. So he said what the Meraglim wanted was to bring down all the Hamshachas of Chochmah into Malchus, into speech, into Midbar, Midaber. They wanted to bring down Elokus into the level of spirituality, not into the level of Gashmias. Shesham yesh kam kenyu b'meisa migdal shleim v'chol ha'bchinas. But what was the story? So he says, Aval Yeshua v'kolev amru teva eretz ma'ed ma'ed. It's interesting. Yeshua and Kolev, and there you see everything in Torah is so exact. The Meraglim came back and they said it can't happen. Right? You can't bring down godliness into the world. What did Yeshua and Kolev come back? And they didn't say Teva ha'aretz ma'od. The land is very good. They said Teva ha'aretz ma'od ma'od. Very, very good. What does that mean? That dafkin gashmis, you come to a better good than it is in ruchnius. In spirituality, it's good, but it's not ma'od ma'od. It's not double infinite. Shaidei Eretz Yisrael shelemata dafka. Dafka through physical Eretz Yisrael. Bechinas mitzvahs maisis yom shel bechinas ein tabaruchu bechinas ma'od bli gvul. In the level almin stimun avedal ma'od ma'od based upon ma'od, double ma'od, meaning almin stimun the almin des gallion. Not only to reveal Elokus into the hidden worlds, but to reveal Elokus also into the physical worlds. Ki be'emes, ika kavanasi yizbarich. Why did Yeshua scream Teva Eretz Ma'od? Why is it so important to bring it into action? What's wrong with spiritual mitzvahs? What's wrong with Gan Eden? It's not a bad place. What's wrong with that? Because Hashem wanted Dira b'tachteinim dafka. Hashem wanted a dwelling place dafki in the lowest of the places. Meaning, she nigla le'ein kol basar. Like it says in the pasuk, v'ro kol basar yachtov. As the Rebbe Rashab writes, basar as basar should see godliness. In other words, when it says, eventually Mashiach comes, v'nigla kvei Hashem, the revelation of God will be revealed. V'ro kol basar yachtov, and all flesh will see. Kipi Hashem diber. It doesn't say all people will see. It doesn't say all neshamas will see. It says all flesh, which means flesh as flesh.
Animals included.
Hunk of meat is hunk of meat. Yeah, kol basar. She'agila lamata kamei lamayla. Not only that, va'adarab on the contrary, b'yaseh says. Dafka from Gashmis, because light that comes from darkness is a greater level of light. The greater the level, okay? He says the greater the thing, dafka can come down lower. And if it doesn't come down low, shows it's not great. L'mashal, mibar seichel gadol, a super intelligent person. She'ef shelegalis chochmas lamekabel sichle bedibur. Ki em beremes b'maise dafka. He says, sometimes a brilliant person cannot reveal something in speech. He can only reveal the deepest concept in writing. The Dafki Yochel Gabia says, Kinyamai Mazal, Daila Chakima B'remiza. The Gemara says like this, for a Chacham, a hint is enough.
Right.
For a Chacham, a hint is enough. But a hint is not the actual concept that you want to reveal. But he says, a Chacham, Dafka, the greater person. In fact, it's interesting, when Alter Rebbe was interrogated by the Russians, when he was in prison, and so they were shooting questions about the godly, about kfir, about denying, about the whole concept of belief in Hashem. And one question, they asked Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe said he can't explain it in speech, he has to write it down. He'll give him time, he'll write the answer down for them. And also in the interrogation, which is even more remarkable, they were asking shooting questions at Alter Rebbe, yeah. And then he said, they asked a question that it says that Malchus is the lowest of all levels. How could you say sovereignty, the Tsar, is the lowest of all levels? So it says, Alter Rebbe just smiled at them. He didn't answer it. He smiled. And the Rebbe explained, they understood that the Alter Rebbe basically is simply, the Alter Rebbe said, you want me to answer it? You'd rather I don't answer it.
What?
You'd rather that I don't answer it. And they saw that he answered all the other questions. He answered all the other questions, so they realized, okay, he made a fool out of them until now. He said, okay. But the Rebbe explains, because it was too deep for the Goyish cup to understand, so that the Rebbe smiled because he couldn't bring it down into speech. And that come into action.
They saw that he could listen.
They saw that he answered all the questions very well, and they were afraid that he's going to embarrass them.
Did he ask him about Malchus?
But Malchus, different level, yeah.
How did they know about Malchus?
These people are very learned.
So they didn't mean Malchut Shamayim.
That the Russian scholars, which you knew a lot of different things.
So they didn't mean Malchut Shamayim.
No, well, what they
Physical Malchut.
right?
Why would you say that Malchut is the lowest?
It is in the Spheres with its chesed word first, and you say Malchus. But yeah, but Malchus, because it's the lowest, originates in the highest. Okay.
You could have said that, and they would be very happy.
No. Ki b'em is kol shu madrega yesig gevei ma'ed. The greater the thing, I'm sorry. Okay. V'ed mashal michaitzim shel even teiv boher. Okay, it's like another thing. You can have a stone that's shining, shining stone that has engraved letters. Oh, you have this, I tell you have it on your cell phone, yeah? Sometimes in the sun, you can't read what it says in the cell phone. Dafka, when it's dark, then you could see it. So he says, he said, they didn't have cell phones in those days. He said, Eventei bar, shaydei bihirusi, through the shining of the stone, you can't notice the letters. Dafkan shayva. Then when it's on wax, which is not bright, was not shiny, so then you could see the letters. And that's what it says. Or the isim u'chatem is called mitzvahs Hashem. The u'chatem is called mitzvahs Hashem. Why through tzitzis do you remember the mitzvahs of Hashem? Fisha talis b'chinas or makif. Talis is encompassing. Okay, we learned many times. Why is the halacha that first you put on talis and then tefillin? So the simple reason is because talis you wear 7 days a week, tefillin you wear 6 days a week. Tadiv v'sheina to more common, less common. You do the more common thing first. So the halachically you put on talis first. Kabbalah explains a deeper reason, because talis is the level of makif, encompassing level. And then you have tefillin, which is the mind and the heart, so therefore, but even in the tzitzis, you have the garment, the makif, and then you have 32 strings of the tzitzis that bring the level of talis down. And he says Lamed Beis represents the 32 channels of Chochmah. There's 50 levels of Bina, and Lamed Beis Nesivus Chochmah. So it says, Yavim Izaz Vishatam Talis, which is Lamed Beis Chutim. The Lamed Beis Nesivus Chochmah that come through them are Makif. V'yefshe Yirmeis. And this level cannot be alluded to, meaning, the Meraglim thought you can't bring down the great levels of godliness into Gashmias. And the truth is, no. Dafke the greatest levels of Ruchnias can come into Gashmias. Because the greater the thing, the lower it can fall. Ultimate brilliance of a person, by the way, is not we can lecture to super brilliant people. The ultimate greatness of a brilliant person is that he's able to take those deep levels and communicate with simple people.
That's why they're brilliant.
I
can understand.
If I wouldn't be on tape, I would say something, but you don't want to hear it. We'll leave it. I'll smile at you. I'll leave it unanswered. Well, Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu? Moshe Rabbeinu was the third day. Umadreg gevei made nailo. Okay, and yet therefore he says like this. That's the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't go into Eretz Yisrael either. Moshe Rabbeinu was too great to go into Eretz Yisrael. Like he said, Ma'ayin li basar. Meaning, he said, listen, he couldn't go into Eretz Yisrael because Eretz Yisrael means bringing it into Gashmias. That's why Yeshua was able to lead the Jews, because Yeshua is not as great as Moshe Rabbeinu. So Yeshua was able to come into Gashmias. Afal became, one second. Afal became. His Palo Tov Kuf Tezvav Tfilas Moshe Rabbeinu davened 515 Tfilas, like the numerical of the word Vazchanon, Lo V'Eretz Yisrael. Because that's the ultimate goal, is to go into Eretz Yisrael. So Moshe Rabbeinu davened to Hashem, even though my level is too great to come into Eretz Yisrael, but let me, because that's the ultimate purpose. Again, the reason in Ruchnias, bottom line, why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu go into Eretz Yisrael? Because of this rock. There's all these Baba Mises. The truth is, there were only causes of the real reason. The real reason is because Moshe Rabbeinu was Chochmah Vatzilis. Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't come into Eretz Yisrael to deal with physical mitzvahs. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to deal with the man and the well and the clouds. Gashmiistic mitzvahs, Moshe Rabbeinu was too great to come down to. So therefore Yeshua had to be the one to do it.
So but Israel stayed 40 years in the midbar to get ready to do the Gashmias.
That's why into this week's Parsha, it says the expression, Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, what are the nations going to say? You took him out in Egypt, vayishchatem b'midbar, and you shechted them in the desert. The Rebbe later on asked the question, what type of expression is this? The Goyim are going to say, you took the Jews out of Mitzrayim and you killed them in the... What type of shechita is this? Vayishchatem b'midbar. I'm going to kill you, I'm not going to slaughter you. So Chassidus explained, Vayishchatem shechita means preparing the animal. The Goyim are not going to say you killed them. It's going to use the expression you prepare them to go into Eretz Yisrael.
40 years of